You're listening to the Wordslinger Podcast, episode 86, Whatever the Impulse, with Tina Amiri.
Writing a book. It can be the best way to build or grow your business, or to simply tell the story that you wish to tell. Learn how to write your book in 30 days or less. Pick up 30-day offer today from Amazon, Apple iBooks, or other online retailers.
It's the Wordslinger Podcast, where story matters. Build your brand, write your book, redefine who you are. It's all about the story here. What's yours? Now, here's the guy who invented pants optional, Kevin Tomlinson, the Wordslinger.
Wordslinger.
Hey everybody, it is me, Kevin Tomlinson, the Wordslinger. Thanks so much for tuning in. I've had just these weirdly cool, remarkable weeks in the past couple of weeks. So that's, it's not an excuse, but one of the reasons you didn't hear an episode last week is because I was actually at the offices of Draft Digital, where I'm now the director of marketing. And I spent the week there. We did a launch, and I sort of teased this a little in the last episode, but we did a launch of something at Draft Digital, which I think is very cool. If you are an author, or if you're a book reviewer, or if you're anyone who has anything to do with books, promoting books, if you use that for any sort of income stream, particularly, Draft Digital just introduced something called a Universal Book Link, which is, and we shorten that to UBL. But the idea here is you can create one link that will allow your readers to click through, and then they'll be able to find your book on every store it appears in online. There's a lot more to it than that. I mean, you get there's data that you can get out of this. If you register, you can actually create unique URLs. For example, bookstory.com/Coelho Medallion is a real URL that will lead you to a real place to buy my books, buy that particular book online. It's a very cool tool. So I don't want to turn this into the Draft Digital Hour or anything, but I did want to bring that up because a lot of you are authors. If you haven't heard of this yet and haven't tried it yet, go to books2read.com, and I'll put that in the show notes just for the heck of it. And that's basically the update on my new gig. I've been just blown away. I was so honored to just be approached by these guys, and I think we're a perfect fit. I mean, the way they operate. We'll extend the Draft Digital promo for just a second, but the way they operate, man, they are so author-centric. Everything about their business model is about helping the author succeed. And in fact, they don't actually succeed unless the author succeeds. So I'm very honored to be a part of that team. So if you're an author and you're trying to go wide, distribute yourself in more places than just Amazon, and get into a more global marketplace for your books, definitely want to check that out. There are alternatives out there, Smashwords, for example, and I mention them because Smashwords was kind of the reason Draft Digital even came to be. One of the reasons, anyway. I mean, one of our founders, Aaron Pogue, he's a self-published author, and he does very well. And he looked around the landscape and saw that Smashwords was one avenue for getting into a whole bunch of bookstores at once, and didn't particularly like the experience, and I'm right there with him. I didn't particularly like the Smashwords experience, but Draft Digital offers this really cool, simple dashboard that makes life easy on the author. So, end of promo. I swear they're not paying me to do it. Well, I guess technically they could be. Technically, they're paying me to do it. But anyway, beyond that, I don't want to go into that too much more. But I do want to talk about our guest today. Before I get to the guest, some announcements, housekeeping stuff. The Self-Publishing Answers podcast, that's the show with me, Nick Thacker, and Justin Sloan. We just before I hit record on this episode, we all got together and did a new episode for the show. Now, it's been on hiatus. We took a little summer break. Yeah, it's sort of inadvertently, but it just kind of worked out that way. Now we're thinking about doing that once a year. Spend a couple of months off from producing episodes. This is a chaotic time of year for us. It's kind of weird. I mean, Nick's work picks up around this time. It also picks up at other times of the year, but I mean, around this time especially, And with him bringing, babies into the world, he and his wife, things got a little chaotic. Justin and I also have things going on in our lives that have made them a little chaotic, and it took its toll. But if you are a listener of that show, if you're a fan of that show, and I know a lot of you are, because I've had a lot of people contact me and ask me when it was coming back, and if you happen to be an author who has not listened to that show yet, new episode coming soon. So I don't know when it'll go live. I'm guessing within the next week or two. I haven't talked to Nick about that yet. We need to probably figure out that posting schedule, but it's there. It exists. It's a good episode. It's funny. I think you're going to dig it, and it discusses something that I'm interested in, and I'm going to explore further. And it's funny because it's come up a lot in the past couple of weeks. I won't spoil it for you, but go check that out. Of course, you can listen also to me and Justin Sloan, along with Stefan Bugay, on the Creative Writing Careers podcast. And we have some great guests. We just recently interviewed Michael Scott Earl, who's an author who you will enjoy, and he's got some really interesting ideas about how he markets himself, and his model is probably a good one to follow, actually. But go check out the interview. More of those to come too. So that show's been going pretty steady. That one actually gets a lot of traction, not attraction, but a lot of traction. And we've actually been named as a top podcast, like usually within the top 10 on a couple of different lists lately. So, boom, that's cool. I dig that. I don't get listed on anything. Wordslinger never gets any kind of mention or awards. I get mentions. I don't get any best of category or anything like that. But maybe someday, if you're out there and you actually run one of these lists, do me a solid, nominate me or something. So, but it doesn't matter. So that's some of what's going on. Kara and I are. I think maybe I announced this. We got a dog, and she's awesome. It's been a long time since I've had a dog, but she's a little sweetheart. She's a little Chihuahua. We named her Minnie, Mini, and she's a little white Chihuahua, and she's just so sweet. I mean, she sleeps next to me, actually, and I know some people don't like that, but I've always had, when I've had pets, I've always allowed them to kind of curl up with us. She likes to get right up next to me, and she'll kind of lay her little, her chin on my shoulder or something, so she's very sweet. And I've loved having her. Now we're still working on the, convincing her that pooping inside is less preferable than pooping outside. I think she's catching on, though. She's starting to get it. So if you know pet training tricks, I'm working on the whole crating thing. We got her a kennel that she can hang out in, and that's been nice. But she freaks out when I leave her, like if I go to check the mail or something and leave her in the kennel. She just completely freaks out. So if anyone knows ways to keep these small animals calm when you're not directly in their presence, I'll take the tips. Let me know. Go to wordslingerpodcast.com, hit contact, and email me and let me know. Okay, we're coming up on, I'm at 8.5 minutes, so we'll go ahead and we'll rock and roll right into this interview with Tina Amiri. I think you're going to like this. Now, Tina has a tragic story, but she's just incredibly light. She's just such a positive person, and she's taken these events in her life and done some incredible, positive things with it. And not the least of which is her book, Whatever the Impulse, which you will definitely find links to in the show notes. But it's incredible to hear her story. And, she was also, she says she's part fish. You'll understand what that means when we get into the interview. But I think this is going to be a good one. So I'm going to, without hesitating any further, I'm going to go ahead and roll us right into that. Stick around, of course, after to hear a little bit of a wrap-up. And I hope you enjoyed this interview with Tina Amiri. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Now, I have with me an author. I'm actually looking forward to this interview. There's some interesting things that are going to be in the mix here. But I'm talking to Tina Amiri, and she is the author of Whatever the Impulse. And Tina, I kind of dig what you're into. I can't wait. I can't wait to explore it a little further. But thanks for being on the show.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
So you are. Right now you provide. It says freelance book doctoring. We can talk about that a little. But what I'm really interested in here is the idea of how to take true crime and mix it in with fiction. And I want to know why that's something that you're good at helping people with, first of all.
Okay. Well, I've had a bit of experience in my past. A long time ago, my mother was a victim of crime. She was dating somebody who ended up, we found out later, he had a split personality, and she left. So you would never have known by meeting this person, like a very jolly person, actually. And then one day he couldn't, I guess, take it. He didn't accept that she left. And he went over to the house when I was not home. And he basically shot my mother himself and a friend that was in the house. So I ended up finding that probably a day or so later. And so that's basically my story on.
I'm very sorry to hear that happened to you, actually.
Well, thank you. It didn't. I didn't go off the rails or anything. Yeah, I went off to college like immediately after, so it was almost like a strange, surreal thing that happened, and then life was so different after that anyway. That because I moved away, that it was almost like it wasn't really real. Still isn't. So
yeah. So because of that experience, though, you that became something that you became sort of expert in, I guess. Through exposure, but also through study, right?
I'll never call myself an expert, but there is an interest in abnormal human psychology on a few levels for me. Yeah.
But
because people are, they're just you just never know what's going on inside their head. Everybody comes from such a different background. People have strange ways and on different levels. So sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you didn't interrupt. That's fine. No, I don't want to dredge up anything that you don't want to talk about, of course. But I mean, this is the kind of thing that I talk to people about all the time, as far as how to fold in these life experiences that we have, and sometimes these experiences are positive, but sometimes they're not. And in your case, of course, it was not a positive experience at all. And I'm just wondering how that impacted your choices for as far as like your career. I mean, it had to have had a lot of impact on your personal level, the personal level of your life. But I mean, how did it impact you as far as the work you went into?
Well, oddly, I don't really believe it did impact. I mean, my path was already set. I was going to school as an X-ray tech. I didn't end up staying in that. Funnily enough, blood seems to follow me around, because when I was an X-ray tech, like I did some stints in the OR where we literally had to lift corpses out of like 4 inches of blood to take an X-ray of stab wound victim. So I don't know, it just sort of follows me around. Blood follows me around. but no, that was already set. And then later on, I became a low vision specialist. So I would not say that it directly impacted my career. Maybe some of the writing. But I'm not sure. Because I think even before I wrote this book, my storylines were always sort of similar, and that was before any of that happened.
Right. So let's talk about Whatever the Impulse. So what's the premise there?
Okay, it's a complicated premise, so it's always hard for me to describe succinctly. But basically, it's about a young guy who kind of goes from a very isolated, oppressive existence up till the age of 19 to like a life that's completely opposite, where he's in the public eye, and he doesn't have any of those boundaries he had when he was growing up. So if you're starting at the prologue, you see that he's it's basically 19 years in the past. The prologue. So it's just a little flashback where you see somebody who appears to be his father teaching him sign language, even though he's not deaf.
Okay.
And he's questioning, like, why do I have to do this? And the father is explaining, well, we have to live a different kind of life. You can't really associate with other people. So he trusts him, at first because, that's just how he grew up. He's told he cannot really associate with other people, but even if they're in public, at least that way they can communicate. But other people won't try so hard because not very many people that you come across will, be able to speak in sign language.
Right.
So anyway, and then we flash to like 1984. So the whole book is retro anyway. So just because they had better music back then.
Yeah.
And later he goes into the rock band world, rock scene. So anyway, where was I? So yeah, we see that he's actually working as a bartender in his father's restaurant. It's like a bar restaurant, but he's still pretending to be deaf. Like he's a deaf bartender, and he's sort of renowned for that. And so anyway, everything kind of goes haywire after a while because a girl walks in one day who doesn't give up on him, even though she can't communicate with him that well, and he just normal instincts kick in.
Yeah.
And anyway, he breaks all the rules. Then the father's girlfriend steps in and also doesn't think things are right. And eventually everything blows up. And when he gets into basically in part two, like part one's actually quite short compared to the rest of the book, he ends up in, like I said, a completely opposite existence. The only problem is because of the way he grew up, he didn't even really go to school, so he hasn't had normal social interactions, so his moral compass is a little messed up. So he just falls back on whatever the impulse. So that's it gets progressively more it gets worse for him because he gets into situations where he has to make some really tough decisions and maybe do things that he's seen his father do in the past. And so it's that's basically the premise and why I named it Whatever the Impulse, because he has to fall back on his own instinct.
So what genre is this like?
It's a psychological thriller.
Okay. It had that sound to it. It had that vibe to it. This is very interesting. I like books like this, and I read a lot of this kind of work, mostly to inform what I'm writing, because it's interesting how you can learn a lot about human psychology basically by studying the darker side of human psychology.
That's right.
Yeah,
yes.
And that's pretty interesting. So are you finding that some of your experiences fed into this story?
I really was not thinking about my, anything that's happened to me. I mean, there are murders along the way. So maybe... I'm not really sure. I can't really pinpoint anything where I was thinking, oh, how, this happened. I'm going to write it that way. In fact, when I'm writing, I actually try not to base anything on anything I know.
Oh, really?
Basically the opposite of what other people do.
Yeah.
A lot of people, they'll write a story that is, if it was me, they'd write a story about a woman living in Barrie who, is trying to solve a crime. It's like their alter ego. And
right.
I do not do that. In fact, even when I was like 10 and I was writing stories, my main character was always a male.
Yeah.
So I'm not I don't think I'm typical in any way in life or in writing.
Yeah. So why do you think that is, though?
Well, I don't know.
Well, it just seems curious to me, because here you have these parts, these pieces that you could put together into a very interesting narrative that I think a lot of people would find fascinating. And it fits the genre that you want to write, but you are self-professed. You are actively avoiding using elements from your life and past. So that's just curious.
That's a good question. I never analyzed that. I tend to analyze myself a lot, but but I don't know. I suppose sometimes when people write about themselves, it seems like they're dwelling on themselves. They might even seem like they're being a bit of a victim, and I don't do that at all. So I think it's just easier to steer away. Plus, okay, well, it happened, but do I feel like writing a whole story about that? Not really. I mean, what comes before and after, there isn't much of a story there. So I try to just do something a little more creative that's based on imagination, not so much something that happened to you.
So where do you take the ideas for these things? I mean, are you just sort of synthesizing ideas from news stories or something, or is this just you? Do you daydream these things? And that's a dangerous question, I know, because
Well,
if you're daydreaming murder.
the story evolved. I didn't really know exactly where it was going. And in fact, the industry professionals themselves actually steered me a little bit because I wrote this story that was a little bit fluffier. With the first version, it had like a happy ending.
Right.
Like it was completely different. In fact, even the guy in part two, it was centering around a plot around the movie industry, and I was dealing with a movie industry professional. They said, you know what? This would be a good screenplay. I want you to write this so it doesn't involve a movie within a movie. Like they didn't want it to become a movie within a movie.
Right.
And they said, rewrite it so it's like something else, like sports or rock band. And she goes, all you had to do was change all the words that say movie into rock band. And that's not how it goes.
Yeah, I imagine that
It is not as simple as that. So I go to the world's biggest bookstore and take all these books on the, indie rock bands and start learning everything I could learn about that. It was hilarious. It was not changed, just change the word.
Yeah, so these were your like editors at Caliburn Press, right?
No, this wasn't. This was actually many years ago that this happened. I've had lots of really things that should never happen. Things happen to me.
Right.
Like a person loses the book, seems interested and loses it for 9 months, and another person keeps me on for 3 years and then decides they just don't want the book, but there's no real explanation. Like it was finally perfect, and then they say, "Oh, it's perfect now. Great. Yeah, we don't really want it now.
We're gonna pass." Thanks.
Exactly. And
thanks
then
for all your effort.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The movie person just actually changed positions, and then she couldn't deal with me anymore, and she passed me on to somebody else in the book industry again, and that person was very interested, and then all of a sudden disappeared completely. Yeah. So, I'm telling you, there's no end to the experiences I've had that are not normal.
Yeah. So this has been a project for quite a while for you then.
Yes.
When did you first write it?
Oh, well, it's on and off, but I would say at least 15 years.
Yeah, that's a...
Like I shelved it a few times.
Yeah, and that's pretty common. I have books that I wrote, back 15, 20 years ago that have yet to see the light of day, actually. So I think that's pretty common for writers. So that's interesting in itself because that means that over the course of that 15 years, you had to sort of persevere with it while you went on with a whole other life.
Absolutely.
Being a low vision specialist and that sort of thing. So, what brought you back to it each time? What made you decide you had to keep going instead of just giving up on it? I guess
it was never in my head to not keep going with it. It was just sometimes you get busy, and then you send it out, you submit it to a few places, and the waiting, there's always waiting. It doesn't matter where you send it, you just have to get on with your life because it could be weeks, it could be months before you'll even hear back. And then every once in a while I would have to do not every once in a while, every time I dealt with anybody, I'd have to do an entire rewrite of the entire book, even if it's just looking for one thing, like take out, check every single exclamation mark, check out, find every was in the book and every waste word, every just and almost and really, and all these waste words that people throw in. So it was like I've combed that book so many times for single, like particular things, and I've rewritten it so many times, and I've written parts of it so many times. Yeah. So, and there was always a carrot, dangling at the end, where someone said, "Do this, and we will do this." Especially when I was going through the movie thing, where it was, the person wanted it to ultimately be submitted for a movie. Yeah. And it's just that since that other person disappeared, that was a dead end after probably 2 years of working with them. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah.
That's, I imagine that was frustrating.
I have one very badly painted wall.
Oh, really?
After getting an answer once.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's the way that goes. and you went. This was printed. Was small press or
Yeah.
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 So I mean, you went the route a lot of authors I think end up taking. What made you choose small press over say self publishing?
Just, I guess, ego. You always just want to see if you could get
Looking
accepted
for
by some.
validation. Yeah, I
Yeah.
understand. I
Yeah,
do
exactly. I
understand.
think I'd make a lot more money if it was self-published, but
It's possible. It's then again, do they provide any like marketing and other services for you, or is it still all out of your pocket?
I hired a publicist
Hmm.
recently because it's very limited what a small press can do.
Yeah.
Even major presses really don't give you a publicist for very long. So nowadays, it's almost everybody's on the same field, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I did a lot of self marketing. I mean, I still am.
Yeah. You never get away from that.
No.
It doesn't matter what aspect of the industry you embrace. You're always going to do your own marketing. I actually had a publishing contract for the very first book that I ever wrote. Actually, I guess actually now that I think about it, it's probably the second book I wrote. But I ended up basically closing that contract out and giving the money back. So
Hmm.
you never know what's going to happen in this industry.
No, you
so,
don't.
so okay, so what are you doing in terms of marketing your work? I mean, what are the things you're doing? You've hired a publicist, which is how you and I met, actually, right?
That's
You want
correct.
to you want to talk her up?
Uh, yes, her name is Rachel Sentes
Mm-hmm.
with Gal Friday Pub. Her name is her name is Rachel Sentes. Her company is Gal Friday,
Yeah.
and she's got a lot of connections in a lot of places in the States and Canada. Um, I really enjoy working with her. Her personality is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Uh, and she's hooked me up with a few podcasts, and she is actually going to try to submit it for some film, movie, evaluation. So I'm really looking forward to the results of
Very
that.
cool. I'm always curious. Now I know Rachel, and she's recommended guests to me in the past. Christian A. Brown is one example, and I like her a lot. By the way, Rachel, not
Yeah, so you
Christian.
know her.
Christian's a guy. So I'm always curious, though. I've never really talked to anyone about working with her or working with a publicist. So if you're open to talking about that, I'd love to hear like what the process is and how it's benefiting you as far as pushing this book out there.
I guess it wouldn't be the same for everybody. I mean, know there's different companies out there that like some are more mercenary, I guess you could say.
Right, right,
They have a set formula of what they're going to do for you.
right.
Maybe make really big promises with a small, line at the end of the contract that says, nothing is guaranteed, and then nothing actually does happen.
Right.
Some are more sincere, like I would say Rachel is, where you actually have a plan from the start what you're going to do. She asked me what are my hopes. Now, unfortunately, I didn't know what was possible. I didn't want to say, well, I definitely want to be on CBC. Like I didn't have that in my head.
Right.
I just thought whatever you think is best, whatever you can do, because I don't know what you can actually do to market a book.
Yeah.
That's what I want you to do, because
Yeah.
that's why I'm hiring you, because I don't know what to do anymore past what I've done. So I tried my best. I did dig deep to try to find some things in my head that I could say I really want this. I did mention film would be nice.
Yeah.
I already had a script, actually. Not a script, a treatment. So it's basically a summary, a scene by scene summary of the entire movie. And I did that because I had an agent for a while. And he actually he taught me a lot. Like he was like a mentor. He actually is why I became a book doctor and an editor for him for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And so one thing he wanted me to know is how to do this movie treatment thing. So I did it. And then I had to edit it before submitting it to Rachel to use, because the book had changed so much since
Right.
I did it this time.
Right.
But my agent, I'd probably be better off too if he was still around, but he passed away as well.
Oh, sorry to
I
hear
always have
that.
strange things happen to me.
Blood follows you, like you said.
It does. Uh,
So, okay, a lot of people I know who are successful at anything have mentors like that. How did you end up connecting with the agent? Sounds
literally
like you
the
knew
way
him.
everybody does. Just I looked people up on the internet, and his was his to get to submit a book to him. He had a lot of criteria. He wanted like 5 references from people who have read the book that were not family, and that was easy because I don't really let family read my book.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't have very much family anyway, but anyway, I never did let anybody who was too close to me read the book until it was on the shelf. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So he did that. I mean, it was like, I can't even remember, but it was a list of things you had to do. And most people would just say, forget it, because 99.9% of the time you get rejected anyway. So nobody would have gone through the effort. And I thought, oh, what the heck? I've tried almost everything. I'm going to just do this whole huge project. And I did actually get accepted.
Oh, wow. That's a difficult thing to achieve, actually. For a lot of authors, it's very difficult to find an agent who's, open to taking on someone who's not already proven. So congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm sorry you passed away. Are you trying to get another agent, or are you just sticking with Rachel for right now?
The idea passed through my mind, and I'm just wondering if that would help at this stage. It probably would, and I might.
Okay.
I'm strongly considering it.
Yeah, I think about it. I had a goal this year, and I've met this goal. I mean, I've gone out and introduced myself to more people in the traditional publishing world, including agents. Decided against going full press to try to get books published in the traditional world, but I mean it's nice to have that as a kind of goal, general goal to get these people on board with you. So what's kind of next? I mean, you're going to write a sequel to this, or is you just concentrating on pushing this one out there right now?
That's what I'm doing, concentrating on pushing this one for now. Yeah. But I'm already trying to put together another plot. But I always hit dead ends.
Yeah.
I don't want anything to be too lifelike, like, something you hear in the news, because everyone kind of goes, oh, this is based on, blank. And I don't like that. Some people love that. They want to do that. I'm always the opposite.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to do something that's, something no one has really thought of, and that's almost impossible to do. You probably know yourself. Like, it's almost impossible to write an original plot. It's, I was saying in another interview once that it's really about the characters. Like, people have to connect and believe in your characters.
Right.
And that's what makes, a plot that isn't that original.
So without giving anything away from your book, no spoilers or anything, I mean, is it possible to take the existing characters from your book and move on from there, or is that door closed? Okay. So
it looks like the door is closed, but it isn't really. I could do it.
Yeah.
And I think I could actually see through an entire plot, a whole part 2, but I don't want it to be one of those bad sequels, that turns out to be a bad idea.
Well, and here's what's interesting. This is going to be a challenge for you, I think, is that book went through so many iterations with so many different types of industries and different people that, this next book may not get that treatment. So it's going to be interesting to see if you can bring it in line. I believe you can. I honestly
one thing
do.
for sure, it'll never take this long again, because when I went through this first book, I was learning. I went from, like, I always call it the caveman version, to, meeting industry standards and it being quite publishable. So I don't have to go through that learning curve. All I have to do is edit it maybe a few times to make sure that, because when you write things down the first time, it's never smooth, right? You're going to find things that like repetition and, some bad, like, sentences that could have been written better. But I don't have to go through that entire learning curve where I throw in a million waste words and do a whole bunch of overwriting and, have a really lame plot structure. Or actually, I've always been good at the plot structure, even before I even learned what plot structure should look like.
Right.
I had that. I guess it was a knack early on, because I did always write. Like, it was a natural thing for me.
Yeah. So you're right. You had this whole learning experience through all this. So can only assume that you would have picked up some things that you know make this a faster process. So, what do you think how long do you think it will take you to write this next book?
If I actually can think of a plot, I think it would be within a year.
Yeah, I think you could do that.
Yeah, it's just getting time around work and other things.
Well, yeah, and that's
a very isolating, hobby
right,
when you're writing.
Right. Especially when it does take separating yourself from everybody, because there's just no way to. I've tried to write with. I have activity going on around me, but when it's just like me and my wife hanging out here, it's almost impossible for me to write. I've discovered when it's just the two of us, and I've started writing, and she comes out from the bedroom or something. My writing morning is practically over at that point. Which is probably not a bad thing, but so what made you choose Caliber and Press? How did you end up there?
I was looking for, like we were saying before, not necessarily small press, but sort of a publisher that will do ebooks and print right away.
Right.
If you're, aiming for Random House or Penguin, you're, guaranteed a hard copy right away. A lot of small presses don't actually, publish hard copy right away until they see how the sales are.
Right.
So I was looking for one that did both, and so that's how I just submitted to a few places. I think this one was sort of an isolated event where I sent it to one place, and it actually got accepted.
Yeah.
I didn't have a whole bunch of submissions out.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. So they actually do have a submission process. Like you can't just buy in or something. They actually have to accept your work. Yeah.
That's right.
That's cool. So what were some of the benefits of going with the small press?
That's a good question. I don't know if there's ever a benefit of going with anybody.
Okay,
it was
moving on.
A year before it got published because they were backlogged. So all I can say is, I'm lucky to have found a publisher after my big long wait after the last one lost my book for 9 months. I was lucky to find someone who accepted it in a fairly short period of time, and then did publish it in ebook and in hard copy. And they got it into Canada's major, distributor right away, which was amazing. Right. Not right away, but within 2 months.
Right.
Like Chapters, because I know that's not a thing in the U.S.
But we, oddly enough,
so I was lucky to get it.
Yeah, I hardly ever encounter someone who hasn't heard of Chapters, though. So it's not a thing in the U.S., but we know about it for some reason. I don't know why. I was well aware of it, and we were actually in Ontario about a couple of months ago, and I did a lot of writing from Chapters. So
neat. Okay.
So okay. Well, we're kind of. I'm sorry.
I'm glad to know glad to hear that it's known.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're coming up on our time, so I want to make sure we plug all the right stuff here. But the book is called Whatever the Impulse, and it sounds fascinating. I'm really sorry I didn't get a chance to read it beforehand, so now I'm going to go pick it up and make sure I read it. It sounds like my kind of book. But people can find you online, right? Whatevertheimpulse.com, is that correct?
Absolutely. You can find it just about anywhere. Almost all the major distributors have it. Barnes and Noble, Chapters, of course, Amazon. There's a whole bunch of others that I keep finding it on.
Yeah.
That aren't really that well known. So it's not hard to find. Just punch it in on the internet. There's a video as well.
Yeah, I haven't watched it yet because I pulled up your site and I didn't want to play it while we were on air. But it's like I see flames in a bar, so I'll probably be interested. Is that just like a book trailer? You had a book trailer made? Was it something scripted or what? Did you have it done or did the publisher have it done for you?
No, I had that done. I was working on it for the year before they finally published it, before I even got to editing. Okay. So at least I had something to do for that year.
Yeah, no kidding. So is it like a scene from the book or something, or?
It's basically encompasses the whole book from beginning to end.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah, it's literally like a movie trailer.
Okay. Well,
It isn't a typical book trailer.
you had a treatment and everything, so you had all the materials, so
Yeah.
that's a natural fit. Okay. Well, hey, I'm very glad that we had a chance to talk. I am interested, and for those who are listening, definitely check this out. It sounds like you can find it just about anywhere. And Chapters would be a neat place to go pick it up if you happen to be a Canadian listener. So thanks so much, Tina, for being on. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me.
You got it. And say hi to Rachel for me and everyone
Oh,
else. Just hang out and we will chat right after the interview. So take care.
bye.
All right, that was my interview with Tina. I hope you, I hope you were inspired by that. I mean, here's one of the things I love about this show, and I assume that if you're listening to this point, this is something you also love about this show. But the variety of people I talk to, and admittedly, I talk to a lot of authors. One of the reasons I talk to a lot of authors is because they tend to be a very interesting cross section of humanity. I mean, look back on some of the authors I've interviewed and the topics that they write about, and you can see that they are varied in vast ways, and they bring this they bring a sort of they bring us a perspective. They bring a perspective to the show on topics that sometimes we don't always consider, and you just learn something new all the time, something interesting, something that you can carry forward from the show and go out and explore on your own if you want. I do. I mean, there have been topics, I've talked to a few folks on this show that told me things that ultimately shaped how I thought about a particular subject, even something I was already familiar with. And I went out and learned more because I was encouraged by it. Body language, for example, was something that, we had a guest on the show that was an expert in body language. And so I went and studied that. I had kind of studied that, been interested in that before, but talking to that guest opened up a few avenues for me, and I was able to go and learn a few things. And that informs what I do as an author. In Coelho Medallion, I introduced the idea that Dan Kotler was an expert in body language, and that plays a role in his character now. So even in this, I'm writing the second book now, by the way, and it'll be titled The Atlantis Riddle. And for those of you who enjoyed the first one, I hope you're excited about the second one. I'm stupid excited about it. I just cannot wait until I can release this because it's just turning out to be such an amazing story. But that informed the character. Now, so as an author, that's what this show kind of is, right? Here's an idea you may not have ever heard of, may not have ever thought about. Now go and process, synthesize, add it to your repertoire of knowledge. If you're not an author, I still say that has value. Like you've learned something new that can change your perspective about humanity and about yourself and about your role in the world, your business or your job or your kids, whatever it is that whatever is the biggest focus in your life can only be helped by introducing new ideas and new concepts. So that's the point of the show. And the point of the wrap-up was not necessarily to give you the point of the show, but it does. This is my show. I can do what I want. No, that is what I wanted to talk about here at the end. But then I want to hear from you also, and I want to hear what your perspectives are. If you've got something interesting, if you've got a new angle in the world. You might even end up on the show, really. I mean, I welcome people, approaching me about being a guest. I don't, these days it's interesting. I'm at a point now where I can't always have a new guest on the show. Someone who comes along and says, hey, I want to talk about topic X. Sometimes it doesn't work out. So I turn some folks down every now and then. I'm sorry. And if you're one of those, I hope it's okay. It's just, either we've covered a topic or, I don't like to do episodes that are purely self-promotion. I love the fact that I can help promote authors and promote businesses, but that's not the entire point of the show. That doesn't bring necessarily a huge benefit to my listeners. So I try to avoid purely promotional stuff. We got to be able to talk about something. Anyway, I'm rambling on now. We'll go ahead and wrap up. But thank you so much for tuning in. Now, here's what you can do for me. I've made a few decisions. I'm changing a few things about the show in light of recent developments in my life. There's a lot happening. If you've listened for any length of time, you know about the RV, you know about Draft to Digital, you know about, all the various things that I'm that I'm a part of. One thing that I'm going to do is, as much as I would like for this to become a revenue source, but I'm gonna kind of ease off on asking for Patreon commitments and that sort of thing. It is there. I'll probably bring it up from time to time. But what I've decided recently is this show benefits me in so many ways that I knew about, but I hadn't quite accepted as being worthy. We'll say, we just discussed this on Self-Publishing Answers, so this is why this is fresh in my brain. But one of the reasons I started this show was to allow me to talk to people and gain those insights we talked about, right? To gain those new perspectives. Recently, a lot of the windfall in my life, I've realized, has come directly from producing this show. There are people in my life who are tremendously important to me, who are amazing human beings, who help me, and I help them too. But there are people in my life, and there are opportunities in my life that came to me simply because I'm willing to do this show every week. And frankly, if I took every penny I've ever made from this show as a direct result of this show and put it in a bucket, I'd have a fairly empty bucket. So I don't make money from the show necessarily, but what I do get is all these amazing connections and all. When I went on board with Draft to Digital. And I helped promote those universal book links. The first thing I did was reach out to my network, and that network was more than happy to help me promote that service. Largely because they know Draft to Digital and they like Draft to Digital. That helped a lot. But they also knew me and liked me, and they wanted to be able to help me out. So to all of you, you're amazing people. I love every one of you. I'm so proud and so happy to have you as part of my my network, my tribe, my community. Community is the better word for me. I'm thrilled that you're there and that you've supported me in these things. I'm honored. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. And that really kind of brings me around to this new sort of direction I've decided to take the Wordslinger podcast. I see now what an important role the podcast plays in helping to nurture this community and helping people to to connect with something, right? So that's what I'm going to focus on. If you want to donate something via Patreon, it is still there. You may feel free, and I'd be honored to have it. I appreciate it. I'm changing some of the financial goals for the show. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I'm changing the overall mission of the show, and I have yet to write this down, but I'm going to write an actual mission statement that helps me define what the show is about. It's just become apparent to me lately how much bigger the show is than I ever imagined. How much bigger than myself the show is than I ever imagined. So it's a remarkable thing. So. All that said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. If you want to support the show, this is how you do it. Go to wordslingerpodcast.com. There's links there for all kinds of things. But I would benefit more and appreciate more if you go on to iTunes and rate the show. 4 or 5 stars would be remarkable. I'd appreciate that. And write a review to say exactly what it is you love about the show. And specifically that, because I also want to hear that. So those of you who've already done that, God bless you. I appreciate that help. And you're a part of this. But let's make it bigger. Let's Let's go out and make the show successful enough that it reaches a broad audience and introduces these great guests to that audience and helps us all start thinking in new and profound ways. And that will be payment for me enough. That will be enough to get me by for the rest of my life if I can change the world and make everyone think in new and profound ways. That would be it. That's the payment I'm looking for. So if you love the show, and I hope you do, let me know. Let others know. And that's what I'm going to ask for now. So take care of yourselves out there. This has been a fantastic episode. I'm looking forward to all the fantastic and amazing and wonderful things that we're going to do together in the future. God bless each and every one of you, and I'll see you next week.
Word Slinger.